I mean, the thing that appealed to me from the get-go about this is that the target in question is Ubisoft, and let's just say that we've all had Ubisoft as like a #1 public enemy for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm ready to parachute into France whenever you say.
Yeah.
Operation Overlord, but for video games. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. I'm Alton. With me, as always, is Reese.
Hello.
And Kay.
Howdy.
And joining us in the Thunderdome for video games is Ross from Game Dungeon. How are you doing, Ross?
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, basically, this is an episode I've been wanting to do for quite some time. Basically, since back when you made your games as a service is fraud video, back in like April 25th, 2019. Because this is something I think that we've all experienced on some level, where recently you've been campaigning to sort of try and get The Crew by Ubisoft in some sort of playable state for people who bought it, because the Ubisoft servers are shutting down and making it unplayable. Can you give us an overview of that campaign?
Yeah, actually, it's more than that. What I've been trying to do is I hate the practice of video games that are online only. When the company decides, hey, we're done with it, they just shut it down and then they don't do anything for the end users, so you can never run it again. Like a lot of just completely dead games are because of that. And this has been bothering me forever. And like you mentioned, The Crew is a recent game that shut down like that, but it was unique for a few reasons, because I looked at everything surrounding it and realized, wait, we could actually take legal action on this. Mostly because it's by Ubisoft, which is in France. And also this was a big enough game that there's still a lot of people that were upset about this, enough to get complaints to agencies. And since then, I've been just trying to find every government that is likely to pay attention to this if we raise attention to it, to act on it. And while I'm doing that, I've also set up direct petitions to other governments to just try to stop the practice outright, saying like, hey, when a company shuts down a game, they end support, the people who bought it should be able to play it in some form, not, this doesn't mean keeping the servers running forever. It means kind of patching it and having an end of life plan, which a few companies do, but not nearly enough.
It's something of a plague affecting all modern games. While we were getting this episode set up, it was something that I've just been ruminating on, is like how in the age where basically every video game has some form of online connection, it leaves so many games vulnerable to the second that that publisher or developer or whatever stops supporting the game. It just, either the game is dead or like a significant portion of the game is like no longer playable, which we'll get into later because we've got some news from Nintendo.
Yeah.
But let's go over some of like the basic questions. So I guess the first thing, like I said, this started a while ago. I know you've been doing, I think it started off with Dead Game News, where you were reporting on like a kind of monthly basis on games that were getting killed off.
Yeah, that was something I did for a while, mostly out of frustration. Before that, I even had a big video on a game that was already dead, but I had footage I saved from it to kind of make an episode on it to just illustrate the problem. That was Battleforge.
Right.
But yeah, it's been going on a long time. And it reminds me of like a slow exponential curve, where year to year you barely notice the difference, but then a few years it's like, yeah, that's kind of significant. Then it gets more and more.
Oh, definitely.
So,
like I said, it seems to be like a spreading issue. It's like there are a lot of benefits to like this games as a service thing, where there's like regular content, there's updates after the game has released to fix massive problems, but then you also run into the issue like where it's dependent on that central server. And as you go over in your games as a service is fraud video, that's sort of like the Achilles heel of this entire model that the industry seems to have decided to collectively all use. And we definitely want to get into like some of the games that have decided to do that. Go ahead.
I was just well, it's just reckless. It doesn't have to be a
Mhm.
nightmare to the industry, but if you set up a vulnerability and then you do absolutely nothing once you're done taking people's money, they create the problem. Again, not every company does this. Like a recent example is Gran Turismo Sport. That was largely an online only game for about 7 years. Then they decided, okay, we're done supporting this, and they patched it, and now you can play it offline, or you might even be able to do multiplayer on it still, just without through not through the company.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because this is something that's a very much a recent issue. Because back in the day, you know, like you go over in your videos, there's like Unreal or like arena shooters like that. They would have like software that you could run on like your own server, and so a lot of people had like community hosted servers, and so as a result, the games never die basically because as long as somebody
Yeah,
can run it.
yeah. Unreal tournaments in 2003, 2004. I think they were all delisted last year, and you
Yeah.
can still run them online multiplayer with other people. It's slightly less convenient, but it's like you said, it's safe forever. And it's not even limited to kind of arena shooters like that. In the cases where there have been usually illicit MMO server emulators,
Right.
in some cases, user systems can host hundreds, or I mean, I don't know if it's like typical systems can host thousands, but there are users out there hosting thousands of people for these things. So it's a problem the industry kind of chooses to make. It's entirely preventable.
It's cheaper to do nothing, right? Than it is to like once you've made all the money after like those first 2 weeks or whatever it is that they say is like the most important release period, then it's sort of like it seems like the issue really is like these massive AAA publishers who they they really just don't give a shit. They just want like the quarterly profit earnings, and they don't really have any long term goals or plans or anything other than to just make more money.
I think saying the corporations choose to do it is honestly an incredibly diplomatic way of framing their business plan, because it seems to be like data loss in general is already such a huge issue across sort of internet stuff. But it seems like most companies have it baked into their business model to such like an absurd degree. The thing that I always think about with this stuff, and this is a little bit different than what you're talking about, but still that sort of like we're going to cut the game the second it doesn't make money mindset, is when Blizzard like got hired all these people and got all of these people involved in their Heroes of the Storm like esports coverage, and then just changed their mind. And it was just like, you had promised me like, all this stuff for a year. We had made all these plans for my life because I'm a Heroes of the Storm streamer, and we don't have to make morality judgments about that. And
Well,
that's I'm just saying, and it's just sort of like a very much like a very callous decision from Blizzard to just be doing that one day and just shutting it down with nothing toward those people. And I feel like you see that across the board, and the game shutdowns, and that's what I like so much about this project of yours, is a very definitive, tangible pushback. We could say, okay, there are laws here. There's a very definitive thing beyond just kind of shrugging your shoulders. And so it's just like, come on, let's be real about this for a second, and at the very least, like, maintain this art form that fucking everybody loves, that so many people engage with. And I think it's a very remarkable example of kind of organization, just because you've mentioned several times you don't want to do this, but nobody else is, and you've sort of got this international effort going. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, you were talking about like the other bad practices. I was going to say, me personally, I'm jaded to the point where I'll just deal with all the other crap in the industry. I don't have the energy for that. But it's like when they're actually destroying it beyond any recoverability. I just can't undo how that bothers me in my head. It wouldn't be just games if they were doing the same thing to art or music or film. It just it's
Mhm.
all the same thing in my mind. And I should clarify, because you were talking about real action. The options in the United States are unfortunately incredibly limited, to the point where they may be hopeless. In fact, we're just sort of trying to see if they are hopeless in the United States. The focus of this is overwhelmingly international, where the laws are not locked down on this, or sometimes the laws aren't even clear as to how this operates. So, yeah, if you're thinking it's hopeless in the United States, you might be right. I just want to clarify that. However, if there is a big victory somewhere else, like in France or Australia, people in the United States would almost certainly get the benefits downstream from that, because then if it was required that they have to leave you a working game once they're done with it, well, if they've already done the work on patching it, they may as well roll it out globally and just wash their hands of it.
At the very least, you could download the international client, and
Right.
Americans could play it, something like that.
Yeah, you raise a really good point about the laws not being really well established in a lot of countries, and I mean that's certainly the case in the UK. We just got the Steam engine like a couple years ago,
Uh,
so video games are still to come. But do you think that's kind of what makes this kind of campaign viable? Is the fact that a lot of this maybe has just never been put in front of courts or whoever in a given country? These questions just haven't even really been proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely going into uncharted territory. I mean, um, currently, I'm pursuing like 10 or 11 different paths in different countries of trying to do this. Oh, and I wanted to clarify, when you mentioned petition, these are not like change.org petitions. These are ones where, well, in fact, we've already passed the first hurdle in the UK, but we can still get more. Where you're petitioning government directly. So there's certain standards you need to hit. But if you pass so many signatures, governments have to respond. So they'll at least tell you to your face, are you going to be able to keep your games or not? Or is this violating the law or not? So they'll have to own it. A lot of this stuff, I think the only reason it's been going on so long is because it's just in this gray area in the law where nobody's sure is what's happening. I kind of compare it to when Uber first came on the scene, where people weren't
mhm.
sure if this is this a taxi, or is this a ride sharing, or these employees or contractors. Like, the laws weren't written for something like that, so governments didn't know what to do. And I think that's the situation in a lot of countries. So I'm just trying to press at every single opening that seemed remotely viable to me that I can.
Right.
Oh, and I should mention, stopkillinggames.com is the sort of the headquarters for this, where depending on where you live, especially internationally, it can kind of tell you what you can do, because some countries have way more options than others. But
And what a shock. The United States has one of the worst ones.
Uh
oh yeah,
I mean, mostly, I think if you live in the US and you have friends who live internationally, I think you have a much better chance just letting them know about it. I think that that's the one thing the US does
yeah.
have is the biggest media presence. So,
It's, if you're in the U.S., either getting somebody else to look into this, or if you own the crew, like in any capacity. It's not because, like, oh, it's, I love that game, that's why we're doing it, I'm ignoring the others. No, it really is like an exception that this game checks so many boxes of things we can actually act on. Like, there's lots of other game shutdowns that I would have been happy to have this movement for, except there's always some weird legal hang up in all of them, or we'd be like
mhm.
20% as effective as what this is. So the crew is just kind of like the planets aligning for what we can do on it.
Let's actually get into that. I wanted to get into our definitions, and you have in your games as a services fraud video, you have like a really great segment where you go into what are games as a service and like what distinguishes a video game as a service. And then I can't remember if you go into it in games as a service is fraud or if it's in the later video where you go over why the crew is such a great example of a game that you can actually do this for. I believe it had something to do with how there's like there are games that have like a subscription model and that's not actually any good if you're trying to like have like legal argument as to why it should continue the service.
Yeah, I'll run through that. Games as a service is an industry term which it's usually used to mean games that like they continue having updates for maintaining and adding new content, as opposed to a game where, they sell it once, you play it, then you're done. That's it. They just move on to the next thing.
Hmm.
However, it's synonymous with being online only and having to connect to the company to run it. And a few years back, we did an informal kind of examination of every game that we could find that used this model, and we found once they shut them down, about 97% of them, maybe even a little more, you can never play them again. Or if you can, you're usually lucky because some fanatical geniuses reversed engineered a server emulator,
Right.
often years later. Like, these are people who are probably working at NASA or something. So a lot of games don't get that. It's usually only the really popular ones that get that kind of treatment.
Like the World of Warcraft
Yeah,
classic.
exactly.
It was so popular and so successful that Blizzard had to like make their own thing to stop people from doing it.
Yeah, with World of Warcraft, there is a illicit server emulator, and it
Hmm.
got so big that Blizzard noticed it, and that's what led to them launching World of Warcraft Classic, because they realized, oh wow, there are still this many people who want to play the old game. I guess we can make money off of this.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But yeah, this game's a service model. It's also called live service now. It's been so negatively associated with, they rebranded it as live service, but it's the same thing. With the model, it's not. So that's the thing. It's called games as a service, but it sort of exists in like the gray area of the law, because these games are either they almost never rely on a paid service as defined by the law. Like World of Warcraft is a paid service. You pay for 30 days. You stop paying after that. That's it. That was your 30 days. So that's a clearly defined time period.
Right.
Whereas games as a service tend to either be one of two models, where one where you buy the game, again, the cruise example, this one, in a store, you install it, get online, but you have to connect to the server, and that's a complete dependency. The other model is free to play games, where the game itself is free, but then if you want like a skin or something or a game feature, you pay money for that as a one-time purchase, which most countries would consider goods, not services, and that's how they fund it. But again, they all have that dependency where as soon as that server shuts down, then bam, everything you ever spent money on is gone. And this would be illegal in a lot of other industries. It's just really dumb luck. Games have kind of gotten away with it, and the law has sort of evolved that way, especially in the United States. But in other countries, they've just been sort of playing follow the leader, and there's never been kind of an uproar about this
Right.
until now, best I can tell. So I'm trying my best to push ahead on that. The other part about the crew, what made it best. Well, the primary thing that made it best is it was because Ubisoft, they're in France, and France has very strong consumer protection laws for multiple reasons. So, like, if I could pick any country I would want to try this in, it would be France, just because they have a reputation. They have laws against planned obsolescence. Like, they've sued Valve before and won at the lower levels, though it got kind of shut down by the EU. So that was one
Thanks,
thing.
Brussels.
Also, this was a fairly big game. It had at least 12 million players. So there are plenty of bigger games, but that's enough to find a lot of people willing to send complaints on it. And the other reason, it was also kind of a clean kill, where they shut it down. That's it. Nobody can ever run it again. It's not like they turned off the DLC or turned off just the multiplayer, stuff that would be very difficult to explain to government bureaucrats,
Right.
what that means, or
And it's a pay once game, right? It's something where
absolutely.
you pay an upfront.
And it sold physical copies as well as digital. So it just checks like every box you could think of for like, if we're going to take action on any game, I couldn't think of a better candidate.
I wanted to bring up earlier how you mentioned how what makes this more of a viable option is the internationality, because it very much reminds me of like, do you remember, this was several years ago, but how there was this big pushback on loot boxes in premium games that like started getting legislators in like the Netherlands were starting to like look into actually banning in-game loot boxes or making them publish their percentages or something like that. And when we see, because this is such an international industry, is like when legislation is pushed through in one country, their options are basically, well, our game just doesn't exist in that country at all, or they have to push it out to like the international market, right?
Yeah, loot boxes is in some ways this is harder and easier than loot boxes because loot boxes, if those were made illegal, that would be an existential risk to like the AAA gaming industry because they make so much money off of those things. So they're
Right.
gonna fight that like tooth and nail just all the way because like anything that stops making loot boxes illegal is in their interest in a huge way financially.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing, we're just trying to get the most basic due diligence, especially if you're talking about future games, knowing that this is just part of the design doc. It's not that hard to implement. I mean, it's not that expensive to implement more than anything else. I mean, there's many components to making a game, and that if that's known to just be a requirement, having an end of life plan, it barely needs to cost them anything in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, loot boxes had the advantage though, in that a lot of politicians can jump on the issue of, hey, we're targeting gambling towards kids.
Right.
And yeah, it's kind of surprising more didn't happen on that. Although I think Australia is planning on taking a second round at it. But in Belgium, they ended up banning them. Now, I have heard that's gotten kind of undermined a bit, but still, that's farther than anybody else got. And they went through consumer agencies. I think in their case, it was like the gaming board in the country, because again, this kind of
Gambling, right?
spilled over into gambling laws, which can be.
It's something you can explain to like a 65-year-old legislator that they'll understand. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They've put gambling in the child's toy?
Yeah. In fact, for trying to make these arguments towards agencies, well, I personally care about this because, again, I just hate seeing games destroyed, especially good ones.
Right.
I'm not even bringing that up. I'm just saying the customer spent money, the company that sold it broke it on purpose, and then they went to extensive measures to prevent anyone from repairing it. And they can understand that. So that's the angle I'm just hammering, assuming they know nothing about games,
Which is probably safe. I think the one politician I know for sure who was a gamer is that one guy who like vaped in Congress and got in trouble for embezzling campaign funds to buy Steam games. You remember that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that.
That guy, we need to get that guy on the pod.
Yeah.
But no, that's actually a really good point about presenting these things in a way that legislators will understand. Because just before we did the podcast, I hopped on stopkillinggames.com and signed the British petition. And so it's passed, like you said before, it's past the 10,000 where the government has to respond. If we can get it to 100,000, then it will be, unless there's some strong reason not to, it'll be debated in Parliament. And knowing our MPs, it's difficult to imagine that being a very well-informed discussion.
That's going to be great. It's just going to be like
Yeah.
500 deformed British freaks like, what's a computer?
Yeah, it could be. Look, I'm prepared for some of these to go down in flames. That's the reason I'm pursuing so many different avenues, because I don't think we're going to get a better opportunity than this. So trying to make it count, So let's say petition in the UK just goes nowhere. It goes nowhere in Canada. But then in a consumer protection agency in France says, no, this is a big problem. Well, victory then, we just need one major win.
I mean, a victory in one place then strengthens the case in others, because then it's not just
Right.
something being put before Parliament here. It's so, the French government actually just like made a statement on this, or this court had this ruling, and then we're discussing that in relation to established law
Right.
in another country, rather than just the abstract idea as
It's
well.
very important for places that have common law, like the UK and the United States, because it sets legal precedent, which which is pretty much
We love a precedent.
we love legal precedent, folks, don't we? Um, because it establishes, basically it's like, oh, we have a situation here that we haven't seen before. Well, what have other people done in this exact same case? And then they can refer back to like a successful legal argument, like if somehow we're successful in France and like a court rules in favor of the people versus Ubisoft, then other courts can take a look at that legal decision and use it as precedents. That's my understanding of the legal system anyway. Not a lawyer.
Yeah, well, they'll be incentivized to because they'll find, okay, well, these guys already did the hard work. Let's just do what they did.
Yeah, they run on the time-honored system of copying each other's homework.
Oh yeah, lawyers, judges, legislators, these people are lazy as shit. And if they can establish someone has gone through this and come to this decision, they're way more inclined to just say, well, they were probably right.
Right. Speaking of, how sick are you of reading legal documents? That's one of the questions I have written down.
It's I'm trying to think of how to say this that might not get your podcast in trouble.
We haven't gotten in trouble yet. It's pretty wild things.
Yeah, because my first, not really, well, not in reality, but my first image was just like, the guy just like a meme of a guy sticking a gun barrel in his mouth,
Yeah.
That's about it,
No, that's the official image of the pod. So
yeah,
not you specifically.
Yeah,
just every month is just a news story that makes you want to do that. Like Riot Games, like systemic abuse. This is a wonderful industry. Let me clarify that we can make a podcast about how shitty it is for like 6 years and still never run out of content.
Have you guys noticed that it's never hard to fill an episode?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Oh man. All right. So I guess we've established what games as a service is, why you're going after the crew specifically for this campaign. But I guess the question has to be asked, what is it about this business model that publishers find so appealing? Like, it takes lots of work to, make that like constant content mill, to call it a live service game, to get it hooked up, to keep developing after it's released. So what is it about it that makes it so popular?
Yeah, well, it sounds grueling for the developer end of it.
Yeah.
I bet they vastly prefer the kind where you make the game, you ship it, then that's it, you're done,
Mm-hmm.
But no, they have several. That's one thing I made clear. I'm not trying to stop online only games. I'm just trying to have them responsibly handled when they're done with them. Like nothing about, like I said, I'm too jaded to deal with all the industry problems. Nothing about what we're doing should interfere with anything companies are doing while the game is being supported. So sorry, they're going to continue to be able to do whatever they want. But
that's a separate
fight,
ends,
it's like,
basically.
Yeah, that's somebody else's fight. It's what that is. But yeah, no, there are actually legitimate reasons to have an always online game. One is it does prevent piracy, often to a large degree. Another is they can kind of, especially for stuff that relies on multiplayer, they can kind of keep the entire fan base in one spot rather than having it splintering off, and keep everybody on the same version, for better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
They can collect like stats off of them. Probably the number one reason they care about them is they can set up their own sort of mini economy inside there and keep on selling you more crap. It's obviously lucrative for a lot of companies. That's probably why they're so crazy about it.
They got that horse armor.
Yeah.
Todd, you did this. You were the first one.
A lot of companies can also play follow the leader on this when they see something really successful.
Right.
So they've seen games like Fortnite or Roblox or whoever else is big and have microtransactions, and see them making money hand over fist month after month, not just some big quarterly, like you were talking about the first 2 weeks or something. It's not just that, it just keeps going.
Recurrent user spending is the industry term.
Yeah, like their eyes turn to dollar signs is what happens. So Although I've heard the model is kind of fraying because there's only room for so many players that are going to want to spend lots of money every month, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the thing about live service games is that the model they tried to go with is basically to become your one game, the game that you play, and you only have like so many hours in a day. And for me, it's basically no lifing Warframe, and so I'm not gonna play any other live service when I'm already like addicted to one. Uh, and so it's like if you there's like a limited market space for how many like games as a service can exist before it becomes oversaturated.
Yeah, that's true. If you're right. I hadn't thought of that, but the people who are probably spending a lot on this, they're probably deeply invested into it time wise.
Right.
They're probably not the casual players who just play through a few sessions. They're like, oh, that was fun. Try something else. They probably didn't spend much money. That crowd. So,
Not like the whales, like me. I'm a whale.
yeah.
I'm spending the big bucks on Warframe. I'm getting the big platinum packs so that I can be very lazy and buy things on the market.
So, I know that you don't want to have too much of a pie in the sky hopes, but do you have any sort of like, if this does go through, what do you expect the change will be? Because I feel like the change would be a little bit more impactful than just having sort of like an end of life patch. And the reason I say that is because it seems that the reason a lot of these live service games are greenlit is not because they're just trying to find one that makes a profit. I think almost universally among the AAA game companies, they want like a massive hit with these games. And if they don't get that massive hit, they'll start sunsetting it. And I have to imagine that if they have to start thinking about the end of life on these games that they consider very low risk because they can just pull the rug out from underneath the customers of all time, that's going to make them think twice about shitting out, live service games that, are fail and then are just like shuttered within a 6-month period. You're going to have to consider that to be part of the equation. Do you think that that's on point at all, or do you think that it's going to be low impact enough that that can just be worked into the business model?
It's hard to say because I think it becomes very psychological for different companies.
Mm-hmm.
Where like if you're just there to run a business, maximize your profit, figure out what works, what doesn't, and this new kind of regulation comes along, you can adapt to it and see that, oh, okay, this isn't that big a threat. This is just an extra hoop we have to jump through. All right, we'll just tell the tech guys to plan for this, and yeah, okay, we need another software package until it becomes standardized, and like, okay, yeah, this affected our margins like less than 0.1%. Okay, this doesn't really matter. That's the rational way to look at it, especially for like big companies. It could be more disruptive in the in between for smaller ones doing this. But the psychological element, who knows? Because they might see this as the same thing as us trying to ban loot boxes. Like, oh my God, this is the end. Like, they're trying to tell us how run the game and we have to end everything and won't be able to make money. And maybe there aren't advisors to tell people at the top that tell them, no, you don't need to worry about this. Or now here's something I think does vary on company culture as far as the motivations for shutting down the game. Some companies, I'm pretty sure, like I have a high confidence this is the case with EA, that they just don't care. They don't care
Right.
when the game goes down, and they don't care on the times when people are able to resurrect it again. It's just like whatever to them. They just, it's like there's no thought either way. And so for them, I think it wouldn't matter. For others, though, and I think there was an insider quote on this, but I forget which company. There is kind of this mentality where, hey, if you're playing the old game, that means you can't buy, you're not going out and buying the new one. So they might shut it down on purpose to try to usher people over to the new one. However, I really have to question the numbers on that because when you look at your average gamer, like how many of them are playing a 5, 10-year-old game that's not being supported anymore? Or
Right.
versus how many are playing like the brand new one that's marketed, has trailers, people are talking about it on YouTube. I mean, I think it's a very small percentage that's playing the old one. And even out of those, they may not necessarily want to go to the new one. You know, I'm not sure the numbers pan out for that strategy, but if that's what the head of the company believes, then
Right.
it doesn't matter because again, it's psychological. So this doesn't need to make a huge impact on business, but I can't tell you how it might play out. I mean, it might end up.
Sure.
It could be like the Red Scare of the '50s for how they treat it. So.
But fingers crossed.
Yeah, we could put before the panel of un-American activities for playing a 20-year-old game.
You're put in the fucking Oppenheimer interrogation room. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on a sort of possible more, I want to say, kind of middle ground outcomes. Like you say in your video, you talk about how a lot of these games are treated as like something that's being rented or leased, but without any of the protections that come with that, right? And there's this ambiguity about if you're buying this thing, do you own something now? Is there an outcome you could foresee, and if so, what do you think of a situation where maybe some courts look at this and say, no, actually, you are renting a product, you don't own it, but you're entitled to like almost a tenancy, or where they're saying this is going to exist for 5 years or something like that at point to purchase?
To me, that's meaningless. I mean, like, I don't care if it's 1 year or 4 or 10. Like, just I don't know. It just bothers me. Period. Because everybody after that can never play it again.
Yeah.
Well, the thing to look at it, because I've heard some people say, "Oh no, this might end up worse if you get government involved." In my eyes, it can't get any worse than the trajectory we're on,
Yeah.
because like if there's a game you like and it's destroyed forever, how does gaming get any worse than that? You know, I mean, aside from it like blowing up in your face and
Yeah.
getting shrapnel and like,
If there's one
you
thing
know-
I can think of that's worse than playing an Ubisoft game, it's not being able to ever play it at all.
Yeah.
There's a little dig at Ubisoft there, you know, a little friendly
See,
jab.
that's the thing. If they were all complete crap, I wouldn't care.
Right.
Like that's the see, like, well, with The Crew, that's the second biggest driving game ever made, and I'd argue is the best representation of the American landscape I've ever seen in a game. So yeah, I'm not too thrilled. The story, it's pretty throwaway. The games, it's like okay. I think a lot of Ubisoft games are like okay, but then the world can be really impressive or something. So it's not like my top tier stuff, but there's some value there, you know.
Right.
And hey, one man's trash is another man's treasure. You know, there's plenty of games I'm not into, but other people, that's their life, you know.
Yeah.
So why, why ruin everything for everyone? But for a middle ground, like I can only think of one scenario like I would consider a middle ground, and that's if they were forced to put like on the advertising and on the box for physical copies that this game expires and then gives a date, you know, like in 4 years or something.
Like milk.
Yeah.
I think they really would not want to put that because that would have a psychological effect on buyers. Because
Right.
I think that would hit home the way everything else doesn't. When they see like, well, wait a minute, this game expires? What? You know, because they're not thinking about that, you know, the average buyer. So I would consider that a middle ground, and that would help.
Yeah, in
anything
practice, that
else-
would probably lead to them trying to commit to permanently keeping games available just to not have to put that on the box.
Yeah,
right?
because it would probably be a lot cheaper to just have the end of life plan and never put that on the box and get lost sales. You know,
Sure.
I guess another middle ground that honestly would still be pretty great would be as an alternative to having the game work when it shuts down. They could just release like documentation, maybe server code.
Right. This is the one
decrypt
where
stuff.
this is the option you kind of put out there in your video where it's like you fix it yourself, but they give you the actual like back-end developer tools to fix it yourself.
Yeah, like or something, you know, like a best effort thing, so that even then, the average customer is not going to be able to take advantage of that. But some programmer out there is going to see this and think, oh, yeah, we could probably get a server up in a few days with this sort of thing. And then it kind of rolls out from there. That would be a very acceptable solution for me personally.
Hmm.
Because, okay, let's say it's as you say that, no, this is 100% legal. These are services. You're renting them, even though they don't tell you how long, deal with it. Okay, well, you know what? That's not any different than how it is already. It's just that now that's codified.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't change the reality any. So
They have to tell
there's
you
just
to your
nothing more-
face that you don't
Yeah.
own your games. And I think that that would probably set off like a second wave of activism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because, when it's in this legal gray area, which is exactly where, these corporations want it because that's where they have the most freedom, is like the less legislators get involved, the less people are aware of just how little rights they have concerning the games that they buy, the happier they are because it's a lot less likely that somebody's going to be like, hang on, this is fucked up.
Yeah. I'm a little biased on this, and this is the sort of thing where I'm not. I'm sure there'll be lots of complaining. I don't know how much action there would be or not. However,
Right.
if it was spelled out really clearly, maybe some lawyer who's a gamer is saying, "Wait a minute," and then they file some suit based off of that ruling, and then yeah,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah. Because like once they've actually made a decision that leaves them open to, like then people can dig through legal documents and then like countersue or whatever. Again, not a lawyer. Don't know what I'm talking about. But like,
Well, it's
we have rights, allegedly, supposedly.
yeah. Well, we'll find out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
right
the
now we
one
don't
thing.
know, right? It's like it's not been tested.
Yeah, like I cannot tell you how this is going to end up, but I can almost promise you we're going to get answers from probably half a dozen major countries.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
so that's kind of like my own personal goal with it. But
Well, I think too the nice thing is that this also creates a structure of response that might have not been there, that was not organized before. So even if this has some unfortunate setbacks, the next time, like if EA just turns off Apex Legends tomorrow, people could be like, "Well, I remember Ross from Accursed Farms did this, and we could just." Go through this workflow again, and then the governments will be like, "Oh, we have to hear from the fucking gamers again. Let's
well,
let's maybe think about. We'll have a better language for it." So certainly, I know it's hard for you to anticipate stuff this far in the future, but I think that's another possible good to this.
well, yeah, maybe because listen, it's been hard because like you mentioned Apex Legends, I don't know where the company that makes Apex Legends is located, and that makes such a huge difference. EA has their Europe division in Switzerland, I believe, and the thing is that's outside of the EU, European Union,
Mm.
but it shares some economic overlap with that. But the thing is, so now this is already very messy, and it's not clear to me how to register a complaint on that would land and that the various European governments would respect it or act on it. So now it's like I'm
Sure.
in a fog. So for me personally, like this is it. Like that's why I'm going at this so hard
Right.
because because I think I'm going to get another chance like this again, or it would be something like the Division from from Ubisoft again. So.
Right. Because like we mentioned before, the free to play model of something like Apex Legends makes it a lot more tricky because there's no upfront cost. And so it's a lot easier to like actually see it from like a legal perspective as a service. Because you're not actually
Well,
you haven't bought a product up front, right?
Well, that's what we're also examining because when you buy a microtransaction, that's a one-time purchase. That
Right.
is not like you get this for 30 days and then that expires because that would be pretty clearly a service. Like
Mm.
if like I don't know what you buy, let's say a gun skin in Apex Legends or something. Well, if you have that gun skin for an indefinite amount of time, as long as the game's up, that sounds like a good. So that's what we present to the consumer agencies or any other lawmaking bodies and see if they see it the same way, or else get a clear ruling on it either way. Yeah, I'm trying to go for a microtransactions on this also because of that payment model.
Mm.
And the thing is, for games that are actually services, yeah, maybe you or your audience knows this. Like, I can only think of maybe like 4 or 5 games out that are operating today that fit that definition. Like World of Warcraft, EVE Online, Final Fantasy 11 and 14. I think I read there was another one. I don't even know if it's still up. Ones where you pay per month to
Right.
get like the full game, you know?
Well, they ran into the same problem that like live service games are running into now, where back in the day, everyone was trying to run a monthly fee type of game, and they all ended up getting crowded out by the big boys, World of Warcraft specifically, because like I said, for games like that, there's only like a certain bandwidth that the market's capable of sustaining, and everyone else just kind of dies off.
Exactly. The only ones that made it uh pretty much were either the big ones to begin with, or
Mhm.
else they moved to the free to play model,
Yeah,
which was more sustainable. So
a lot of games move to the free to play model. I think what we were talking about earlier, you're saying how the industry does like the follow the leader type thing where they see a game being very successful. I think patient zero for this was probably GTA 5 as like a big triple A game that ended up having like GTA Online becoming like this massive, massive revenue generator for them.
Oh yeah, that shit made more money than like the Avengers, didn't it?
Thank God.
wasn't Fortnite before that though?
Um,
No,
I don't think so.
GTA Online was way before that, because that's when I was the number one problem when I was doing Xbox tech support was my vile child has stolen my credit card and bought $10,000 in shark bucks or whatever. So
Yeah, you're right. That was way before it.
Wait,
Yeah,
GTA 5 came out
September
in
2013.
2013.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2013.
Wow.
So I think that's like I said, that's probably patient zero. Fortnite was 2017.
Very old.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few patient zeros for other things. Like the
Mm,
first big game I remember that kind of switched over to the, oh, we're keeping the servers online now. I think was what, or on the company side, I think was Modern Warfare 2.
hmm.
right. That's the thing though, is that like for some of these games, people really pushed like the developers and publishers to host the servers because it provided a better quality of service, like specifically for Call of Duty. I remember there being like this really people getting like really upset. I can't remember the specifics, but like there was some Call of Duty game that didn't have centrally hosted servers, and so you had to like rely on peer-to-peer connection, which is for like a shooter kind of gives the advantage to the whoever's hosting.
Yeah, I mean there are
Mhm.
reasons to use that model. And
Right.
actually, I forgot another one. It can crack for multiplayer. It can crack down on cheating too. Makes it a lot harder
Oh,
to
yeah, that too.
pull off. But again, that's not an excuse to take away all rights as a consumer and destroy games and just make
Mhm.
life miserable for everyone else involved. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think sort of like the thing that you've mentioned, but I kind of want to underscore personally is that, unless there is some kind of pushback, it is certainly only going to get worse and worse. There's no ceiling to this. There's no point where they'd say, "Oh, this is too messed up to the users." To use the sort of paid subscription model, once World of Warcraft had like very solidly won the paid subscription war, um, there was like a public business call where they're just like, "Big W, everybody. We can make even more money by reducing the budget 40% and just putting in grind systems and just let the Skinner box take care of all of these WoW players." And then people are just like, "Wow, why has WoW gotten worse since this expansion?"
Mhm.
And it's a pretty clear line that once the profits have been secured, once they're able to sort of make the most of these particular games, you're not going to get like one really great live service game they invest everything into. Those, even the big hitters, are going to get worse.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's again, I'm spread too thin to fight back on the quality front. Like,
No, yeah, I'm not. I'm just
back
commenting.
there.
I'm just saying that that it's a great reason to get involved is because you can just say
Oh,
instead of saying what do I care about the crew. The reason people should care about the crew is because it's going to happen to your game next, and who knows, what they'll push, what they'll try to take away.
First they
Exactly.
came for the crew, and I didn't say anything.
Any game you play online that you enjoy, if the answer is yes, you should probably be concerned about this. you
Right.
know?
Totally.
Or not even just online. Actually, from what I'm hearing, for at least on the PC side, some newer games they never get cracked because the copy protection is getting so robust. Well, if if the copy protection is dialing to some outside server, and then when the company drops support, that server goes down, then everybody has a brick copy. So your single player game you thought was safe may not be in the long term because the
Right.
the copy protection may get too good.
Well, that's something that dovetails nicely into another point that Reese was bringing up, sort of the pre-discussion we had concerning this, where nowadays there are a lot of live service games which are basically just like traditional single player or like peer-to-peer co-op games that could very easily be like completely offline, like Dragon's Dogma 2, and for like a peer-to-peer co-op thing like Helldivers 2, where these are games that, back in like the 2010s would not have had this necessity to be hosted on an online server. I mean, I guess for Helldivers 2, there's the argument that there's like the central planning from like the game master, which is pretty cool.
Helldivers 1 doesn't use a central server.
Right, exactly. It's like literally
Yeah.
its previous game didn't have this issue, but now they have these monetizations sort of on top of what would traditionally be a triple A game.
And it
Yeah.
feels like it's 49% of a live service game, and they get to argue that they're rounding down because there's a massive gift shop attached to it. And I know that the scope of the lawsuit won't have as much, or the law action. I don't know what to call it.
It's everything.
Yeah, it's the law everything. Where
Game
it's
war.
it's still, I think we're seeing big games sort of like edging towards that, even if the Helldivers 2 servers shut down, I can't say what that would mean, if that would be impacted, but it's sort of like it's bleeding into everything. And sort of like if that's going to bleed into everything, then these bad practices will come along with it. Even if, for Dragon's Dogma 2, if they shut the game down, you could still probably play it. Single player,
Right.
it's still like something that's so baked into the monetization scheme that it's clearly like you can't consider the crew or anything like that, or just your online games to be sort of like isolated. It's really sort of like the whole industry at this point.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of them were trying to bleed them together. I mean, the crew is a perfect example of that, where the crew has a full single player campaign with cutscenes and missions, and you can play through the entire game and never interact with another player.
Right.
But it's always online, and when you're driving in between races, yeah, you might see another player, and there's nothing that game has to be multiplayer for. I mean, obviously, some people enjoyed the multiplayer. I'm not against mixing the two, but any road that doesn't lead to destroying the damn game is the one I want.
Absolutely.
Adding on to that, I think one thing that I would like to bring up in relation to this and sort of the game preservation issues is that even though Steam by now is, very beloved by gamers for like the quality of service, and the convenience of being able to have like your games all on one platform and play them on any computer that you own. It is DRM, and it's very unlikely to happen, but who knows? But if Steam were to ever like shut down its servers, you would never like be able to play those games again either.
Well, sort of. It gets complicated with Steam.
Mhm.
It does have DRM for many titles, but my understanding is it's relatively easily bypassed for the stuff that's literally called like Steam DRM or Steamworks or something.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, some games on Steam or a lot of games are DRM free. So if you download them, you can run them standalone. You don't even need Steam anymore. You can just copy them somewhere. But it's kind of, it takes research to figure out which is which. The
Mhm.
thing with Steam is it doesn't block companies from doing whatever else they want to do. So if they have some DRM on top of the normal Steam stuff, then we're in the same place again. Whereas, if the industry was all doing this kind of more responsibly, just the fact that Steam exists wouldn't necessarily be an issue, because let's say, okay, guys, sorry, but we're going to have to shut down Steam in 6 months. There would just be a massive exodus of everybody downloading all their games and backing them up, because they would think like, oh, shoot, I better grab it while I have it,
Mhm.
and then I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not trying to get companies to support stuff forever, even something like Steam, which probably isn't going away anytime soon.
Mhm.
As long as you have the opportunity to get your stuff and keep it, that's the part that matters to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one thing I've been thinking about, and that I've sort of grown to appreciate about at GOG.com, that they literally just like they have their own launcher now too, but it's all DRM free games, and you can just download an installer and just like save it to like your own personal hard drive somewhere, like an external drive, and just always have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and GOG guarantees that. I think itch.io does, and there might have been another one, but
Mhm.
with stuff like Steam and Epic, it's like roll a dice, which whether sometimes you can, a lot of times you can't. It just varies on every title. No, actually, that reminds me though, in Australia in 2014, their consumer protection agency sued Valve for not offering refunds. And they ended up winning, and they rolled out letting people have refunds globally. So that's a perfect example of the strategy for this, where just one major victory can change the industry.
Oh yeah, that's great. I forgot about how they had like a legal battle with the EU saying that they needed to give refunds for after a certain period, right? That was ages ago.
Yeah, well, Australia was where the victory was, but yeah.
Oh, was it? Man,
Finally, Australia does something good.
Australia
Thank you.
finally Australia does something.
Listen, they may help a lot. They're definitely a major kind of avenue of this campaign, along with Europe.
The dark horse in this, because watched your latest video on this, and they have like
But
surprisingly
the real
strong.
dark horse is
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
anything could happen in Brazil. Like it's surprise. That's the one where I have no idea how it's going. Others, I'm very optimistic as far as getting a clear answer.
You heard it here first, folks. Ubisoft CEO getting sent to the Lulags.
No, well, the thing is, I think we have a fair shot in many countries, but at the top level, once we're talking like internal government politics, I have no idea how things function there. In fact, one scenario I'm sort of mentally prepared for is what I'm calling like the Illuminati scenario, where everything we do just gets shut down in almost a comical fashion once rising past a certain point, because we've stumbled on to some sort of inner workings I didn't even know existed, but then we'll know.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Ross, are you afraid of Ubisoft sending the Assassin's Creed assassins after you?
No, because when it comes push comes to shove, these are games. I'm not exposing war crimes. I'm not messing with like a major defense contractor or something. If I was doing that, yeah, I'd be probably in a cabin in the woods somewhere. But well, although I think we have had one sign of success that I've gotten reports in unofficial discords that I'm not even a part of, and I think the Reddit that I don't run related to my videos and site, there was somebody poking around there that was acting suspicious. So somebody did a check on them from their personal info and found on their LinkedIn page they worked for a PR firm that represented Ubisoft in the past.
Oh,
Oh,
let's
shit.
go.
Oh, hell
Get
yes.
scared, bitches.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give their name just because I don't think that would be productive. But
Of course not.
that's a sign to me that we're having some impact if that's happening. So
That's great.
Yeah, that's probably the most
I'll give the
hopeful
name.
sign.
I'll give the name. We know who you are, Jeremy.
no, I'm not worried. But I'll take all the heat on this. I don't mind that part.
Yeah. Are you worried about becoming a Christ-like figure?
No, like my entire goal with this is to get gears in motion, and then I can't even stop them if I want to.
Right.
So the longer this goes on, the less relevant I personally am to this, which is perfect because then it becomes in the realm of judges or prosecutors or stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's just what a Christ-like figure would say during Act 1.
I'll tell you something they wouldn't say. One image that popped into my head, if you've ever seen the movie True Lies, at one point in the scene, the terrorist has secured a nuclear warhead, and then they've armed it, put a timer on it, and then he starts pouring wet cement on it into a crate. I'm thinking okay, they're really committed at this point. We're not backing out of this, so I kind of look at it like that.
Nice.
All right, we're helping you pour the cement.
Exactly. We're mixing it up.
Pour it.
We're stirring the pot of cement with love. That's the secret ingredient for nuclear terrorism is love.
It's love. So true.
Well, we're getting on to an hour and 20 minutes. We had some stuff to talk about with some bullshit with Nintendo shutting things down and Little Big Planet, but I think that so far we've had a really great conversation. And so I think we should probably wrap things up, get, all those links that are relevant for people to go look at and, plug all your shit. How's that sound?
Sure. Well, just to cover in case people are chomping at the bit for Nintendo and Little Big Planet, I looked into it.
Mm-hmm.
It looks very complicated and unclear to me if people can act on that or not. That's how hard this stuff is. Unless you're in Australia, you might be able to act on those in Australia. And maybe other countries that we just couldn't figure out the research on, but it wasn't obvious to me anywhere else.
Right.
Because again, this stuff gets muddy fast. As for links, the big one is stopkillinggames.com, and I hope to rapidly get back to my normal videos, which tend to be kind of light and fun and just talking about games. And I usually have those at accursedfarms.com or on the YouTube channel.
Right.
Check out Ross's Outrun-alikes video, which I loved.
Oh yeah. I just wanted to say that it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I've been a big fan for a while. I think I started watching your videos with Freeman's Mind, which is the big one, and then Game Dungeon came out, and that was one of my favorite series. So
Thanks.
just keep up the good work. And now this personally aggravating Ubisoft executives. So just 3 for 3.
I'm calling this a bogus detour.
Yeah,
I don't want to be doing it. I want to be out as soon as I can.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I feel like I've done everything, which I'm through the worst of it. I'll say that much.
Nice.
Well, it seems like you've got a whole team of people helping you out. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to for the?
Oh man, it's kind of like a mercenary camp almost. I don't. It would be hard to pick one person, and some of them don't actually want a lot of attention. They're glad that I'm out in public doing it. So
being the face.
Well, okay, no, I'll mention. Here, I know someone who would like attention. We have a pretty cool logo on StopKillingGames.com, and that was by, I think it was Gray Matter Aus. So that might have been another. I don't know if that's Australia or Austria, but
It's one of them.
Yeah, I heard he would have liked the mention, so sure. It's a cool logo. It has a gamepad disintegrating.
Nice.
That's very interesting. That's sort of like the inverse of our logo, which is a controller shattering the world into two pieces.
Nice. I think if it's Oz with no T, it's Australia. If there's a T, it's Austria. I think that's their tell.
Okay.
Nice. So you can detect Austrians in the wild.
And run.
That's the link, stopkillinggames.com. Go check that out. Especially if you live outside of the burnt out hellscape that is North America, go check it out. If you're Australian, definitely. If you're French, in this one instance, we will appreciate you. And if you're in Brazil, sign up to your local Ubisoft capture team, where they will be capturing Yves Jamo and putting him in the Lulag.
The Brazilians, Conky, you know what to do.
If anyone owns the crew, you can act.
Oh yeah, if you own the crew, yeah.
Yeah.
Viewers, international viewers, anybody who can do anything. We never ask anything of you, so this time you're required. StopKillingGames.com. I think we should have no other plugs to muddy the water. Just leave it on that.
That's the plug. Stop Killing Games. My British shooters, get that fucking thing signed. I want to hear Keir Starmer say Ubisoft.
Right. And also go to Accursed Farms, Ross's channel, and look up Games as a Service's fraud, and then the largest campaign ever to stop publishers destroying games. Watch both those videos. They'll give you a great grounding in what's going on and why this is important. And I think that should be everything. Well, Ross, was there anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time and the effort you're putting in.
Yeah,
exactly. Man. I'm glad you're doing it, not me. This sounds like a lot of hard work.
Oh, I wish. I kept hoping somebody else would step up, but it didn't happen. So.
That's been my experience with like organizing anything, is that if I don't do the work, nobody else does.
That's right.
Yeah, there's like
I'm stupid and lazy.
From the Hangover, where there's like one guy says he'll do something, but says he'll help, but does. Another guy shows up at the very beginning and shows up at the very end. Another guy has no idea what's going on the entire time, and the other guy says like does 98% of the work.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on the pod. Thank you to the listeners for listening and also filling out that petition. Go to stopkillinggames.com, especially if you own the crew, especially if you are not in the United States.
Yeah, and if you don't fall in those criteria, spread the word. Let people know in all of the freak discords you're in. Let's make it happen.
So many little goblin discords.
No, Australia petition may be opening very soon. Not sure.
Excellent.
Oh, sick.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
If your heart stops beating, I'll be here wondering, did you get what you deserve? The ending of your life, and if you get to heaven, I'll be here waiting, baby. Did you get what you deserve? The ending if your life won't wait, then your heart can't take the loss. You heard the news that you're dead. No one ever had much nice to say. I think that I liked you anyway. You take me from the hospital bed. One never granted exactly what you planned, and one never granted.